The Great Hall of the Galactic Council was the largest structure ever built by intelligent life. It floated in the empty space between three star systems, a monument to the power of the 12 species who ruled the galaxy. The walls were made of living crystal that changed color with the mood of those inside. Today, the crystals burned a deep and angry red. Park stood at the center of the hall. He was a small man by human standards with gray hair and calm eyes. He wore a simple black suit, nothing fancy, nothing threatening. Around him, towering figures from a dozen alien species looked down from their elevated platforms. Some had scales, some had fur, some had bodies made of living metal. All of them hated him. Behind stood his translator, a young woman named. She was 32 years old, trained in 15 alien languages, and she had been preparing for this moment her entire adult life. Her face showed nothing. Her heart was beating fast, but no one could tell. High Arbiter raised his staff. He was the leader of the council, a being from a species so old that they had forgotten their own. His body was thin and gray, with 4 arms and eyes that glowed like dying stars. When he spoke, his voice filled the entire hall without any need for technology. "Humanity," said, "you have been given every chance. You were welcomed into our community. You were offered protection. You were shown mercy. And how did you repay us?" The alien delegates murmured in agreement. Their sounds were strange to human ears, clicking, rumbling, high-pitched whistles, but the meaning was clear. They were angry. "You refused to pay tribute," continued. "You refused to surrender your outer colonies. You refused to accept your place in the natural order of things. You have insulted this council. You have insulted every species that built this civilization over thousands of years." Listened without expression, translated every word into his earpiece, though he understood most of the Arbiter's language already. He had spent 40 years learning it. "Do you have anything to say?" asked. "Any final words before we deliver our judgment?" Looked around the hall. He saw the insect-like creatures with sharp claws and hunger in their compound eyes. He saw the massive beings covered in thick armor, built for war. He saw the merchants, thin and clever, already calculating the profits they would make from human territory. He saw the others, each one believing that humanity was just another weak species waiting to be conquered. "I have only a question," said. His voice was soft, but the hall's systems carried it to every ear. "In all your thousands of years, in all your conquests and victories, have you ever stopped to wonder why some species choose to fight even when they cannot win?" His glowing eyes narrowed. Foolishness, pride, the inability to accept reality. Smiled. It was a small smile, barely visible, but saw it and felt a chill run down her spine. She knew what that smile meant. "Perhaps," said, "or perhaps those species knew something you did not." Before could respond, the delegate interrupted. His name was, and he commanded the largest military force in the council. "Enough of this," clicked. "We waste time on a dying species. Deliver the judgment." Nodded slowly. He raised his staff high, and the crystals in the walls turned from red to black, the color of war. "The Galactic Council hereby declares total and absolute war upon the human species," announced. "All human territories are forfeit. All human ships are to be destroyed. All human colonies are to be brought under council control. Any human who resists will be eliminated. This judgment is final." The hall erupted in noise. The aliens celebrated. They had done this many times before. They had crushed the Pale Ones of Sector 7. They had broken the machine minds of the Outer Rim. They had ended 100 species that dared to challenge their authority. Humanity would be no different. But Park did not react. He did not beg. He did not threaten. He simply stood there, that small smile still on his face, and watched the celebration with patient eyes. Leaned close to him. "Ambassador, they have declared war. We must contact Earth immediately." "Not yet," whispered back. "Let them enjoy this moment. Let them believe they have already won. It will make what comes next even more surprising." Sir finally turned to look at her. His eyes were not afraid. They were not angry. They were something else entirely. They were the eyes of a man who had been waiting for this day for a very long time. Now it begins, he said. Understood. She pulled out a small device from her pocket, something that looked like a simple communicator. But it was much more than that. It was connected to a satellite network that humanity had secretly built over 60 years, hidden from every council scanner, powered by technology they had never shared with anyone. She pressed a single button and transmitted one word to Earth: Prometheus. 12,000 light-years away, in a bunker beneath the frozen surface of Luna, a red light began to flash. Admiral Minu looked up from his desk and felt his chest tighten. He had known this day would come. He had trained for it. His father had trained for it. His grandfather had trained for it. 3 generations of preparation, all for this single moment. Sir, his aide asked, is that? Yes, Minu said. He stood up slowly, feeling the weight of history on his shoulders. Wake up the Ghost Fleet. Send word to every hidden station. The Council has declared war. What are our orders? Minu walked to the window and looked out at the stars. Somewhere out there, 40,000 enemy ships were preparing to attack his home. They thought they knew what humanity was. They thought humans were weak, primitive, barely worth the effort of conquering. They were wrong. Our orders, Minu said, are to show them exactly who they have chosen to fight, and may God have mercy on them because we will not. In the great hall of the Galactic Council, the celebration continued. They laughed. They cheered. They divided up human territory before they had even fired a single shot. And Park watched them all, still smiling, knowing that everything was going exactly as planned. Humanity had been waiting for this war since the first day they met the Council. They had smiled and bowed and accepted their place at the bottom of galactic society. They had bought old ships and outdated technology. They had pretended to be harmless. But in secret, in the darkness between stars, they had been building something else entirely. The Council thought they were starting a war. They did not understand that the war had begun 60 years ago, the moment their ships first entered human space. And humanity had already won. They just did not know it yet. Admiral stood on the command bridge of his flagship, the Eternal Victory. He was a creature of war, born and bred for combat. His body was covered in hard black shell, and his 4 arms could tear through metal. In 200 years of service, he had never lost a battle. Around him, 40,000 ships moved through space like a swarm of angry insects. They came from every council species, warships with their razor-sharp wings, battle cruisers built like flying fortresses, merchant support vessels loaded with supplies for a long campaign. It was the largest fleet assembled in 300 years. Reports commanded. His tactical officer, a young named Set, brought up a holographic display. We are 3 days from the human border, Admiral. Our scouts report only scattered defenses. 2,000 ships at most, all of them outdated models purchased from the Merchant Guild. Clicked his mandibles in satisfaction. Pathetic. This will not be a war, it will be an execution. He had studied the humans before this mission. They were a strange species, soft and weak, with no natural weapons and fragile bodies. They lived on a single world for most of their history, fighting among themselves like animals. When the Council found them 60 years ago, they had only just discovered how to travel between stars. The Council had offered them a choice, submit or die. The humans had chosen to submit. They paid tribute. They followed the rules. They stayed in their small corner of the galaxy and caused no trouble. Until now. Why did they refuse the ultimatum? Set asked. They must know they cannot win. Considered the question. Pride, perhaps, stupidity. It does not matter. In 1 week there will be no more human government to refuse anything. Their leaders will be dead and their people will serve the Council as slaves. Far away, On the frozen moon of Luna, Admiral Minu was having a very different conversation. The war room was deep underground, hidden beneath a kilometer of ice and rock. It had been built in secret over 40 years, one piece at a time, using materials that did not appear in any official record. The Council's spies watched Earth constantly. They saw everything that happened on the surface, but they never thought to look beneath the cold and empty moon. "Show me the enemy fleet," Minu ordered. Captain activated the main display. She was 40 years old, a calm and serious woman who had spent her career preparing for this exact situation. Her fingers moved across the controls, and a three-dimensional map appeared in the air. 40,000 ships, she said. They are approaching in standard formation. Ceremonial columns with flagships in the center and support vessels in the rear. They expect us to meet them at the border and negotiate. They expect us to surrender, Minu corrected, like every other species they have conquered. Will we? Minu smiled. It was the same smile that Park had worn in the council chamber, a smile that did not reach his eyes, a smile that promised something terrible. "We will do something much worse," he said. "We will let them believe we are going to surrender, and then we will show them what humanity really is." He pressed a button on his console. Throughout the Luna base, alarms began to sound. Not the alarms of panic, but the alarms of awakening. Something that had been sleeping for 60 years was about to open its eyes. "Activate the Ghost Fleet," Minu ordered. Deep in the asteroid belt between Mars and Jupiter, hidden inside hollowed-out rocks and abandoned mining stations, 15,000 ships began to power up. They were not like the old vessels that humanity showed to the Council. They were something else entirely. Something new, something dangerous. For 60 years, humanity's best engineers had worked in secret. They studied every piece of Council technology they could find. They learned how alien shields worked, how their weapons functioned, how their ships moved through space. And then they built something better. The Ghost Fleet was humanity's greatest secret. Ships that could appear and disappear without warning. Weapons that could cut through any shield. Engines that could travel faster than anything the Council had ever seen. Each vessel was crewed by men and women who had trained their entire lives for this war, who had inherited the mission from their parents and grandparents. Captain watched the activation reports come in. "All ships reporting ready, Admiral. We have full operational capacity." Minu nodded. "What about our other assets?" "The shadows are in position throughout Council space. Intelligence networks are active. Economic disruption teams are standing by. Everything is ready." The shadows, another secret. Human agents who had spent decades building lives among the alien species. Merchants, workers, servants. Nobody important. Nobody worth watching. But they watched everything, learned everything, and sent everything back to Earth. The Council thought they knew humanity. They had studied human television broadcasts and internet communications. They had watched human wars and human politics. They thought humans were violent and disorganized, clever but primitive. They did not know about the secret council that had ruled Earth since first contact. They did not know about the hidden factories and training facilities. They did not know that every human government, every human corporation, every human institution had been working together toward a single goal. "Admiral's fleet will reach the border in 3 days, reported. "What are your orders?" Minu turned to face his officers. They were good people, brave people. Many of them would die in the coming weeks. He owed them the truth. "The Council expects us to fight like every other species they have conquered," he said. "They expect us to defend our borders, to protect our worlds, to react to their attacks. We are not going to do that." "Sorry." "We are going to attack them first, not at the border but everywhere. Their supply lines, their communication networks, their economic centers. We are going to show them that this war will not be won with ships and weapons. It will be won with planning and patience and sacrifice." He pointed at the map. Admiral thinks he is leading an invasion. He does not know that the moment his fleet crossed into open space, it became trapped. We have ships behind him, around him, waiting for the signal. When we strike, we will not aim to destroy. We will aim to confuse, to capture, to break their will to fight. Why capture? One of the younger officers asked. Why not just destroy them? Minyu looked at the young man with something like sadness in his eyes. Because we are not like them, he said. We do not want to rule the galaxy. We do not want slaves or tribute. We want to be left alone, to live in peace, to explore the stars without fear. The Council does not understand this. They think every species wants what they want: power, control, dominion. He paused. We are going to teach them a different lesson. We are going to show them that mercy is not weakness, that peace is not surrender, that humanity can be the most dangerous species in the galaxy and still choose to be kind. The officers were silent. They understood. This was not just a war for survival, it was a war for the soul of their species. Send the signal, Minyu ordered. Operation Quiet Storm begins at 300 hours. May our ancestors watch over us, and may our children forgive us for what we are about to do. Captain transmitted the orders to the Ghost Fleet. Across the solar system and beyond, thousands of human ships began to move, silent and invisible, toward their targets. The Council had announced their war with ceremony and celebration. Humanity's answer would come in darkness and silence, and the galaxy would never be the same again. The Battle of Relay lasted 11 minutes. It changed everything. Admiral was drinking hot liquid from a ceremonial cup when the first alarm sounded. He had been relaxed, almost bored. His fleet was 2 days from the human border, traveling through empty space. There was nothing out here, nothing but stars and darkness and the long journey to conquest. Report, he said calmly. He expected a minor problem, a navigation error perhaps, or a small malfunction on one of the support ships. Admiral, his tactical officer said. His voice was strange, afraid. Ships behind us. His 4 arms went still. That is impossible. Our rear guard would have detected any approaching vessels. They did not approach, sir. They just appeared. One moment the space was empty. The next moment, Set's voice trailed off. His compound eyes were wide with fear. Walked to the main display and felt his blood turn cold. 3,000 human ships had materialized directly behind his fleet. They were not attacking. They were just sitting there, weapons powered up, waiting. Hal whispered, "We would have seen them coming. Our sensors would have detected them days ago." "I do not know, sir. They are using some kind of technology we have never seen before. They simply appeared out of nothing." His mind raced. This was not how wars were supposed to work. The Council had spent thousands of years perfecting the art of conquest. They knew every strategy, every tactic, every trick that any species could use. No one had ever surprised them like this. "All ships raise shields," commanded. "Prepare to engage. We still outnumber them significantly." But before his orders could be carried out, the human ships attacked. They did not use normal weapons. They did not fire lasers or missiles or any of the conventional armaments that the Council expected. Instead, they fired something else. Strange pulses of energy that passed right through shields as if they did not exist. The flagship Eternal Dominion was the first to fall. One moment it was powering up its weapons. The next moment, every light on the ship went dark. The great warship drifted through space, completely dead, its crew floating unconscious inside. "What is happening?" demanded. "What did they do?" "Some kind of neural disruption field," Set reported. His voice was shaking now. "It penetrates our shields and affects organic brains directly. Our crews are losing consciousness." Ship after ship went dark. The humans moved through the Council fleet like ghosts, targeting vessels with surgical precision. They did not destroy anything. They simply turned off the lights and moved on. In less than 5 minutes, 3,000 Council ships were floating dead in space. Admiral watched in horror as human vessels approached his captured ships. Small craft launched from them, carrying boarding parties. The humans were not content with disabling the fleet. They were taking prisoners. Why? Asked. He was talking to himself now. Why would they capture instead of destroy? Set had no answer. Neither did anyone else on the command bridge. They had never seen anything like this. Every species the Council had ever fought used the same basic strategies. Attack, defend, destroy. The humans were doing something different. Admiral, a communications officer, called out. We are receiving a transmission from the human fleet. Put it through. A face appeared on the main display. It was a human woman, middle-aged, with calm eyes and a steady voice. Her name was Colonel Han, and she commanded the human forces in this sector. Admiral, she said, your ships have been disabled. Your crews are unharmed. They are being collected and will be treated according to the conventions of war that exist among civilized species. His mandibles clicked with anger. You dare lecture us about civilization? You are insects, primitives. This changes nothing. It changes everything, Admiral. We could have destroyed those ships. We could have killed everyone aboard. We chose not to. Remember that choice when you consider what happens next. And what happens next? His expression did not change. Your crews will be released. They will be given food, medical care, and transportation back to Council space. They will carry a message with them, a message for the Council and for every species watching this war. What message? That we did not want this conflict, that we asked for peace and were given war, that we have the power to destroy you and choose mercy instead. The Council declared this war. We did not. Remember who started this. Remember who can still choose to end it. The transmission ended. 4 hours later, Admiral received a report that made his blood run cold. The human ships had released all captured crews. 3,000 vessels worth of soldiers, pilots, and officers were floating in escape pods, alive and unharmed. Medical teams had treated the wounded. Everyone had been given food and water for the journey home. Each escape pod carried the same recorded message that had delivered to. Each survivor became a carrier of that message. When the first escape pods reached Council space, the political impact was immediate and devastating. On the warriors gathered in confusion. They had been prepared to die in glorious battle. They had been prepared to fight a savage enemy that deserved destruction. Instead, their sons and daughters were coming home healthy, fed, and speaking of enemies who fought without hatred. They apologized, one returned soldier reported to his commanders. When they captured us, they apologized. They said they did not want to fight. They said they hoped we could be friends someday. The commanders did not know what to make of this. Their entire culture was built around war and honor. An enemy who captured instead of killed, who healed instead of hurt, who offered peace instead of demanding surrender. This was not how war was supposed to work. On the similar confusion spread. Admiral received reports from his surviving officers and threw them against the wall in rage. They are playing with us, he snarled. This is some kind of trick. But what kind of trick was it? What did the humans gain by showing mercy? Could not understand it. In 200 years of warfare, he had never faced an enemy like this. On the Council, High Arbiter read the reports in silence. His crystalline staff sat unused beside him. His glowing eyes were dim with worry. Ambassador Park, he said to his advisors, bring me everything we have on him. The file was thin, too thin. Park had arrived at the Council 50 years ago as a junior diplomat. He had been polite, quiet, and apparently harmless. He never caused trouble. He never asked difficult questions. He simply watched and listened and smiled. 50 years. Realized with growing horror that the humans had been planning this for 50 years. Every smile, every bow, every moment of apparent submission had been a lie. They had been studying the Council the entire time, learning their weaknesses, preparing for the day when they would finally show their true face. "What are they?" whispered. "What have we awakened?" No one had an answer. Across the galaxy, the message spread. Human soldiers were efficient but not cruel. Human commanders were strategic but not savage. Human ships were powerful but not used for destruction. And slowly, a question began to form in the minds of species who had served the Council for generations. If the humans could defeat us and chose mercy, what does that say about the Council that chose conquest? It was the first crack in an empire that had stood for 3,000 years. And it was only the beginning. 6 months into the war, the Council's economy began to collapse. No one understood why at first. Lieutenant Commander sat in her office on Earth, surrounded by holographic displays showing trade routes, supply chains, and economic data from across the galaxy. She was 38 years old, quiet and brilliant, and she had spent her entire career studying how the Council worked. Not how their ships worked, not how their weapons functioned, how their civilization worked. "Report," said Defense Minister O. He was an old man now, gray-haired and tired, but his mind was still sharp. He had been part of the secret council that prepared humanity for this war since he was a young man. "The Merchant Guild has raised prices on medical supplies by 300%, reported. The agricultural shipments are delayed by 2 weeks on average. The ammunition factories are running at half capacity due to raw material shortages. And they still do not know why." Smiled. It was the same quiet smile that seemed to run through all of humanity's leaders these days. "They suspect sabotage, but they cannot prove it. Our agents are too well hidden. They have been building their covers for decades." The truth was simple, but it had taken 60 years to put in place. When humanity first joined the galactic community, they had sent out thousands of their people to live among the alien species, not as spies in the traditional sense, not as soldiers or assassins, just as ordinary people living ordinary lives. A human merchant who sold supplies to hospitals, a human engineer who maintained agricultural equipment, a human accountant who worked for the Merchant Guild. Thousands of them, scattered across council space, doing nothing suspicious, attracting no attention. Until now. Now those same humans were doing small things, very small things, a shipment delayed here, a price increased there, a contract renegotiated, a supply route changed. Each action was tiny, almost invisible, but together they created chaos. "The beauty of their system is also their weakness," explained. "The Council has made every species dependent on every other species. They cannot feed themselves without food. They cannot defend themselves without weapons. The Merchant Guild controls all trade, but they do not produce anything themselves. If we disrupt the connections between them, the whole system begins to fail." Minister O nodded slowly. "And our military operations?" Admiral reports continued success. "We have captured or disabled 40% of the Council's forward fleet. Our ships are avoiding direct confrontation with their main forces, striking supply lines and communication networks instead. They cannot catch us, and they cannot ignore us." Casualties? Minimal on both sides. We continue to capture and release enemy personnel. The psychological impact is spreading. Many Council soldiers are beginning to question why they are fighting. This was the heart of humanity's strategy. They did not want to destroy the Council. They did not want to conquer anyone. They wanted to make the war so expensive, so confusing, so pointless that the Council would eventually choose peace. It was not a strategy that any other species had ever tried. It required patience. It required discipline. It required a kind of thinking that went beyond military tactics and into the realm of psychology and economics. And it was working. On the Council, High Arbiter called an emergency meeting. The 12 species that ruled the galaxy gathered in the Great Hall, but this time there was no celebration. The crystals in the walls had turned a sickly yellow. the color of fear. "We are losing," announced. His voice was flat and tired. "Not on the battlefield, we are losing everywhere else." "That is not possible," Admiral protested. "We still have 30,000 ships. We still have the largest army in the galaxy. The humans cannot have more than a fraction of our strength." "Strength means nothing if we cannot use it," replied. "Our supply lines are failing. Our economies are struggling. Our populations are beginning to ask questions that they have never asked before." He activated a display showing news reports from across Council space, protests on worlds, economic unrest among the merchants, military desertions among the... Everywhere the same pattern. People were starting to doubt. "The humans are not trying to defeat us militarily," continued. "They are trying to make us defeat ourselves, and I fear they are succeeding." "Then we must change our strategy," said Ambassador of the Merchant Guild. He was a thin creature with calculating eyes, more interested in profit than in pride. "Perhaps it is time to consider negotiation." His compound eyes flared with rage. "Negotiation? With primitives, we would become the laughingstock of the galaxy." "We are already becoming the laughingstock of the galaxy," replied coldly. "Have you seen the reports from neutral species? They are watching this war with great interest. They are seeing the mighty council brought low by creatures they considered beneath notice. Every day this continues, our reputation suffers." The argument went on for hours. The species blamed each other. The military blamed the merchants. The merchants blamed the military. No one could agree on what to do. Meanwhile, on Earth, Ambassador Park was having secret conversations of his own. He sat in a small room with no windows, facing a holographic image of the ambassador. There was named, an old warrior with scars covering his armored body. He had fought in a dozen campaigns for the council. Now he was having doubts. "You have been planning this for decades," said. "It was not a question." Nodded. "Since the day your ships first entered our system, we knew what the council was. We knew what you did to other species. We smiled and bowed and played the role of the weak newcomers, and all the while we were preparing." "Why, you could not have known the council would declare war." "We knew it was possible. We knew that eventually we would do something that displeased your masters, and they would demand our submission or our destruction. We chose to be ready." Was silent for a long moment. "You could have built weapons instead of agents, ships instead of economic networks. You could have prepared for a war of annihilation." "Yes," agreed. "And if we had won such a war, what would we have become? Another empire built on blood and conquest. Another species ruling through fear. That is not what humanity wants." "Then what do you want?" Leaned forward. His eyes were intense now, burning with something that had never seen in a human face before. "We want what every species wants, Ambassador. We want to raise our children in peace. We want to explore the stars without fear. We want to trade and learn and grow alongside other civilizations, not beneath them." He paused. The council was built on the belief that some species are meant to rule and others are meant to serve. We reject that belief. We think the galaxy can be something better, something where every species has value, where cooperation replaces conquest, where the strong protect the weak instead of exploiting them. Stared at the human for a long time. In all his years of war, he had never met anyone who talked like this. Every species he had ever known wanted power, wanted control, wanted to be on top. "You are either the species in the galaxy," said slowly, "or the most foolish." Smiled. "Perhaps we are both, but we would rather try to build something good and fail than succeed at building something terrible." He extended his hand, palm open, a human gesture of peace that had learned to recognize. "They are warriors," said. "You have served the council for generations because you believed it was the only path to survival. But there is another path, a path where your strength protects instead of destroys, where your honor means something more than victory in battle." Looked at the extended hand. He thought about his children, the future of his species. He thought about the soldiers who had come home from human captivity, confused and changed, speaking of enemies who treated them with kindness. He thought about what it might mean to be something more than a weapon for other species to use. Slowly, carefully, he reached out and took the human's hand. "Tell me more," he said. And in that small room, with no witnesses and no ceremony, the first crack in the Council alliance became a break. The war was far from over, but humanity had just taken the most important step toward winning it. Not with weapons, with words. They were the first to break. 8 months after the war began, Ambassador stood in the Great Hall of the Galactic Council and spoke words that had never been spoken in 3,000 years of history. "The withdraw from this war," he announced. "We will not fight the humans any longer." The hall erupted in chaos. Delegates shouted in a dozen different languages. High Arbiter slammed his staff against the floor, but no one listened. The crystals in the walls flashed through every color, unable to settle on any single emotion. "Traitor!" Admiral screamed. His forearms trembled with rage. "You cannot abandon the Council. The treaty forbids it." "The treaty was built on mutual benefit," replied calmly. He had been a warrior all his life, and he had faced death many times. This was nothing compared to battle. What benefit does this war bring our sons and daughters fight and die for what? To conquer a species that has done nothing to harm us. They are enemies of the Council. They are enemies because the Council declared them enemies, not because of anything they did. Turned to face the other delegates. "My warriors have fought the humans. They have been captured and released. They have been treated with honor and respect. The humans could have killed them. They chose mercy instead. What kind of enemy shows mercy?" A weak one snarled. "A stupid one." "Or a wise one," countered. "A species that understands something we have forgotten. That war should be the last choice, not the first. That victory means nothing if it destroys everything worth protecting." Finally managed to restore order. His voice was heavy with exhaustion. "Ambassador, think carefully about what you are doing. If the withdraw, you will be alone. No other species will trade with you. No other species will protect you." Smiled, it was a strange expression on his face. "We will not be alone, Arbiter. The humans have already offered us a partnership, trade, technology, mutual defense, everything the Council promised but never delivered." The hall fell silent. This was worse than withdrawal. This was defection. "You would ally with the enemy?" asked quietly. "I would ally with a species that treats my people with respect," replied. "Something the Council has never done." He turned and walked out of the hall. His guards followed him. No one tried to stop them. They were too shocked to move. Within a week, 4 more species announced their withdrawal from the war. The Pale Ones, a quiet species that had been conquered by the Council centuries ago, were the first to follow Then the Singers, beings made of living sound who had always been uncomfortable with violence. Then 2 smaller species that had served the Council out of fear rather than loyalty. Each one told the same story. The humans had contacted them in secret. They had offered friendship instead of domination. They had promised a new kind of alliance, one built on equality rather than hierarchy. On Earth, President Shin addressed the United Nations Assembly. Her words were broadcast across every frequency that the Council could receive. Every species with a communication system heard her voice. "We did not want this war," she said. Her voice was calm and strong. "We asked for peace. We were given ultimatums. We asked for partnership. We were given demands for submission. We asked to be treated as equals. We were told to know our place." She paused, letting the words sink in. "Humanity has learned many hard lessons in its history. We have fought among ourselves for thousands of years. We have made terrible mistakes. We have caused great suffering. But we have also learned something important. We have learned that lasting peace cannot be built on fear. It cannot be built on dominance. It cannot be built on the suffering of others. Lasting peace can only be built on respect, on understanding, on the recognition that every thinking being has value, regardless of how strong or weak they might appear. She looked directly into the camera, as if speaking to every being in the galaxy personally. To the species of the Council, we extend our hand in friendship. Those who take it will find humanity a generous ally. We will share our technology. We will open our markets. We will stand beside you in times of need, not above you, not below you, but beside you, as partners, as equals, as friends. To those who continue this war, we do not hate you. We do not seek your destruction, but we will not surrender. We will not submit. We will defend our people and our allies with everything we have for as long as we must. The choice is yours, war or peace, fear or friendship, the galaxy we have always known or something better. The transmission ended. Across Council space, billions of beings discussed what they had heard. Many dismissed it as propaganda. Others were not so sure. On the Council watched the recording for the 10th time. His staff sat untouched beside him. His advisors had stopped coming to him for guidance. The alliance was fracturing, and he did not know how to stop it. She is clever, he said to himself. She offers them everything we promised but never gave: freedom, equality, partnership. Words that mean nothing to us but everything to species that have lived under our rule for generations. He thought about the history of the Council. 3,000 years of conquest and control. 3,000 years of building an empire that ruled through strength and fear. It had seemed eternal, unshakable, the natural order of the galaxy. And now it was falling apart because of a species that had barely discovered fire when the Council was already old. How? Whispered. How did they know to strike at the foundations instead of the walls? The answer was simple but could not see it. The humans had spent 60 years studying the Council, not just their technology or their military, their culture, their history, their psychology. They understood the Council better than the Council understood itself. They knew that the empire was not held together by strength. It was held together by the belief that there was no alternative. The moment another option appeared, the moment species began to think that there might be a better way, the whole structure would begin to crumble. And that was exactly what was happening. Admiral Minu received the news of the Council fracture with mixed feelings. He sat in his command center on Luna, surrounded by reports and projections, watching the galaxy change. 5 species have withdrawn, Captain reported. 3 more are negotiating with Ambassador Park. The Merchant Guild is demanding an emergency session to discuss economic consequences. And the military situation. The Council fleet is in disarray. Without support, they have lost 30% of their ground forces. Without the Pale Ones, they have lost critical supply routes. Admiral is threatening to launch a full assault on human territory, but Arbiter is blocking him. Knows they cannot win a direct confrontation, Minu said. Not anymore. The psychological damage is too great. Their soldiers have seen what happens when they fight us. They have seen our mercy. Many of them do not want to fight anymore. Nodded. So what happens now? Minu stood up and walked to the window. Outside, the stars burned cold and bright against the endless darkness. Somewhere out there, billions of beings were watching, waiting to see what humanity would do next. Now comes the hard part, he said. Winning the war was never the goal. Building the peace that comes after, that is what matters. That is what will determine whether this was all worth it. Can we do it? Build a new kind of alliance? Minu thought about his grandfather, who had helped design the first hidden shipyards. His father, who had trained the first Ghost Fleet crews. 3 generations of sacrifice and preparation, all for this moment. We have to, he said, because if we fail, then all of this was for nothing, and humanity does not accept failure, not when it matters. He turned back to face his officer. Contact Ambassador Park. Tell him to prepare for the final phase. The council is breaking. It is time to offer them something to believe in. The message went out across the stars, and in the great hall of the Galactic Council, the crystals in the walls began to change color once again. From the sickly yellow of fear to something new. Something that looked almost like hope.